I've been on a seamwork journey recently, and it seems endless as there are still many on my mind for the coming cool months. This is the Callan sweater, which I love for its relaxed fit, edge-stitched facings, side slits, and most of all, the shoulder buttons. I use this soft heather orange sweater knit and these gold square buttons from my stash, and I love the combination. I sewed this project using a narrow zigzag stitch of a 0.5 width and 2.5 length for all of the seams and all of the top stitching. Of all the sweaters in my closet, this one really stands out with its unique shaping and design features. I hope you sew one too. Let's get started. Stay stitch the neck edge of your front piece and the neckline edge of your back piece, stitching within the seam allowance. On the wrong side of the back piece, we're going to apply interfacing along where the buttonholes will be placed. I'm just using small rectangles of knit interfacing to fit those buttonhole areas, placing them right over the buttonhole markings from the pattern piece. Sew your 4 buttonholes according to the buttonhole markings from the pattern piece, but don't cut them open. Along the outermost edges of my back bodice piece, I've also applied a strip of interfacing to reinforce the shoulder seams. Place the front and back bodice pieces right sides together and pin the shoulder seams. And then sew or serge with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Press the seam allowances toward the back, then we're going to edge stitch those seam allowances in place. Apply knit interfacing to the wrong sides of your facing pieces, place them right sides together, and pin those shoulder seams. Sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and press the seams open. Finish the raw edges of your facing all the way around the outer edge. Place your facing and the neckline right sides together and pin at the notches. Continue pinning your way around, noting that the shoulder seams of the facing will not match the shoulder seams of the bodice. Sew or serge the facing to the neckline with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to understitch the facing. To do so, we're going to fold the facing over its seam allowance and then stitch the facing to the seam allowance underneath with about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, doing this all the way around. Turn the facing to the inside of the neckline. Give that a good press. Then we're going to edge stitch close to the finishing stitches on the inside of the facing, securing that facing all the way around. You can sew from the inside so you can clearly see your finishing stitches, or you can do this edge stitching from the outside, just feeling through the fabric to feel where those finishing stitches are. Place each of your sleeves right sides together with their corresponding armholes and pin in place. Sew or serge both of your sleeves in place with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and then press those seams toward the sleeves. Along the bottoms of the front and back pieces at the side seams, the pattern recommends fusing 1 inch by 1 inch pieces of interfacing over the dot markings from the pattern piece. Do this to the front and back pieces. Then at each of the dot markings, we're going to clip to the dot, careful not to clip beyond the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then we're going to start stitching at each of the dots at the end of our clipping, stitching along that side seam and over the underarm seam, all the way to the bottom of the sleeve. Repeat to sew both side seams and underarm seams. Apply knit interfacing to the wrong sides of both of your hem facing pieces. Then we're going to finish the upper inner edges all the way across, from one top edge of the extension, along the center, and back to the other side of the extension. Place your facing pieces right sides together and pin from the top of the side seam to the dot as transferred from your pattern piece. Sew from the top to the dot with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at both points to secure. Just as we did for the front and back bodice pieces, we're going to clip to the dots, careful not to clip beyond the 3/8 inch seam allowance. Finish these short seam allowances separately on both sides and press them open. With right sides together, place the hem facing along the bottom edges of the sweater. Pin in place matching the dots and the notches. Now along the front and back of the facing edges, we're going to start sewing from the dot, back stitching to secure to the bottom of the front piece, all the way across the bottom edge and to the dot on the other side. Repeat for the facing along the back edges as well. Trim those seam allowances and the bottom corners. Turn your facings right side out to the inside of the garment and give everything a good press. Now, just as we did for the neckline facings earlier, we're going to sew along the finished edges of the hem facing all the way around. You can do this from the inside so that you can see those finished edges clearly, or you can do this top stitching from the outside, just feeling through the fabric underneath to feel the finished edges. As you approach the side slits, you're just going to continue pivoting around those finishing stitches on the inside. To hem the bottoms of the sleeves, I've gone ahead and applied knit interfacing along the bottom edges. I've also finished the raw edges all the way around. Now I'll fold those bottom edges to the wrong side. I'm folding them up here by 1 inch, and then I'm going to edge stitch close to my finishing stitches all the way around. Repeat for both sleeves. Hand sew your buttons over each of the faux buttonholes. And now the sweater is complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future sewing tutorials, and I'll see you in the next video.